Although the Catholic Church has a very rich history, there are moments that critics like to target, for example, the Spanish Inquisition. Few institutions suffer from a worse reputation in popular culture. We do not need to look further than the comments of my previous video, which was about Queen Isabella of Castilla, to see this. What surprised me most is that I had barely mentioned the Inquisition in the first video because I was only covering the first part of Isabella's life. These comments are not surprising. You have probably heard about the horrors that surrounded this period. There are numerous videos, articles, movies, and books that recount how the use of torture, mass executions, burnings, and religious persecution were inherent to this institution. But what if I told you that a lot of this information is exaggerated or even completely false? In this video, I will reveal some surprising facts about the Spanish Inquisition that you probably have not heard before, debunking the most common myths concerning this institution.
I think our views of the Inquisition had been changed largely by the opening up of the archives of the Inquisition. And so all of this has opened wide the debate about the Inquisition and has also demolished totally the previous image, which all of us had.
In 1994, the BBC released a documentary titled The Myth of the Spanish Inquisition, marking a significant moment in our understanding of this infamous historical period. For the first time, historians gained access to the carefully maintained records of the Spanish Inquisition, each case preserved in remarkable detail. These documents are particularly valuable because they were never intended for public scrutiny, meaning no effort was made to alter or embellish the facts. This deep dive into the archives shattered long-standing misconceptions, as Professor Henry Kamen of the Higher Council for Scientific Research noted, demolishing the previous image that all of us had. The documentary acknowledges that much of the exaggerated narrative surrounding the Inquisition was fueled by English Protestant enemies of Catholic Spain, who utilized the newly invented printing press, first popularized in Protestant countries, to disseminate their version of events.
For the first time, it was possible to wage a real propaganda campaign. This is what the enemies of the Spanish Habsburgs did, very skillfully.
Throughout history, dramatic exaggerations about the Inquisition have found their way into popular culture and left a lasting impression. Edgar Allan Poe's 1842 story The Pit and the Pendulum vividly portrayed the Spanish Inquisition as an arena of sadistic priests and horrific torture. The trend continued into modern entertainment, with History of the World Part 1 offering a dark, heavily critical portrayal, while video games like Assassin's Creed weave the Inquisition into their narratives of oppression. These depictions, though compelling, have shaped a view far removed from historical nuance. In the following minutes, I will debunk 3 myths surrounding the Spanish Inquisition. The widespread association of the Inquisition with torture is prevalent in books, movies, and museums. However, what if I told you that for the standards of its time, the Spanish Inquisition was just and enlightened?
In fact, the Inquisition uses torture very infrequently. In Valencia, for example, I found that out of over 7,000 cases, only 2% experienced any torture at all, and usually for no more than 15 minutes, and less than 1% suffered repeated torture, in other words, more than once. I found no one suffering torture more than twice.
We find, comparing the Inquisition, merely within Spain with other tribunals, that the Inquisition used torture less than other tribunals. And if we compare the Inquisition with tribunals in other countries, we find that the Inquisition has a virtually clean record in respect to torture.
Furthermore, many assume that torture is a relic of the past, believing modern Western society would never resort to such acts due to our advancement. This is false. At Guantanamo Bay, many prisoners have been held captive by the United States government and tortured, and the facility remains open today. Moreover, many detainees have not received a trial. In contrast, the Spanish Inquisition upheld due process for all accused individuals, which was quite rare in Europe at that time. Another persistent myth concerns the number of executions during the Inquisition. History.com claims 32,000 people were executed. The Guardian affirms that some historians are convinced that millions died. In fact, it had been widely accepted until very recently that the Inquisition killed at least 30,000 people, with the highest figures going into the hundreds of thousands. However, it has been concluded by now that the Spanish Inquisition killed between 3,000 and 5,000 people in over 3 centuries. This amounts to less than 3% of all cases heard, since around 150,000 were tried in total by the Spanish Inquisition.
In 16th century Spain, and dealing only in terms of Protestant heresy, fewer people died for heresy in Spain than in any other Western country. The Inquisition, for example, in the whole of the 16th century, maybe executed something like about 40 or 50 people at the outside in the whole of Spain, in the whole of the 16th century, and that includes, of course, the whole of America as well.
In comparison, during the same period, over 150,000 women were burned as witches in the rest of Europe. Many believe that the Inquisition directly targeted Jews and Muslims, giving them the option of either converting to Christianity by force or being executed. This was not the case. The Spanish Inquisition primarily targeted those who claimed to have converted to Christianity but were found to still be practicing their former religion, Judaism or Islam, as well as Christians who were found to hold heretic beliefs or perversions of the Christian faith. This means the Inquisition could not try a Jew or a Muslim, but only those who claimed to be Christians. Normally, a confession and repentance was enough to spare someone from the penalty of death. The Inquisition was careful with its trials, granting full due process to anyone accused. So the Spanish Inquisition, far from the exaggerated tales of horror we often hear, was actually one of the more methodical and restrained judicial bodies of its time. While it certainly wasn't perfect, the reality is that other tribunals and secular courts of the era were far harsher. Compared to the witch hunts in Northern Europe, the mass executions under the French Committee of Public Safety during the Reign of Terror, the Inquisition was relatively moderate. It followed legal procedures, allowed appeals, and even had safeguards against false accusations, something that cannot be said for many of its contemporaries. Yet, thanks to the propaganda spread by the enemies of Spain and of the Church, many people today still believe that it was an inherently evil and unjust institution, where torture and cruelty were prevalent. It has been cast as a uniquely terrifying institution. In truth, its reputation has been shaped more by myths than by facts. History is always more complex than the stories we've been told, and the Spanish Inquisition is a perfect example of that.